Sophomores, get out of bed. It's time to take some notes. It's time for school. The bell's ringing. Get out of bed, Peyton Clark. All right. Now that you are all awake, I'm excited to announce that because of Governor Justice's plan, hopefully we'll be all back in school on Tuesday, January the 19th, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So we cannot wait for that to happen and get to see all of you guys. Maybe I won't have to make any more videos then. But we'll see. I mean, if anything has taught us with COVID is that plans can change. But right now, that's the plan. We're going to start our new unit today. It's Unit 3 about life in the colonies, life in the British colonies over in the New World of America. So we're going to take some notes today, not very long, and there's one assignment that you have to do that goes with these notes. So before you get out your notebook, I'm going to start with a little calendar right here that Alex Ellison got me for Christmas. It has a stupid joke on it for the day. Here's one I like. I went down to the paint store to get thinner. It didn't work. Obviously, it didn't work. I didn't get thinner. Oh, well, I thought that was funny. Get out your notebooks. At the top of your notebook, I want you to write U.S. History. These are our Unit 3 notes. Life in the English colonies. Now, we know now, in our story as we've told, that the colonies, they have grown since Jamestown. They've grown since the Pilgrims moved over and Squanto helped them. And now the population in the British colonies over in the New World rapidly increasing. And this unit we're going to learn about life in the colonies and how the King and Great Britain governed these colonies and some of the laws and things that they put on the colonists who lived in the New World. We're going to be leading up, obviously, all of these things lead up to what you know is going to happen, the American Revolutionary War, where eventually the colonists decide to go to war with the King in Great Britain and break off for their own independence and form their own country, which became us, the United States of America. But we're working towards that. Now, speaking of silly jokes, this is a little silly joke to get your brain going today. Why couldn't the bicycle stand on its own? Because it was too tired. Get it? Too tired? And that's what that little prefix right here, bi. Bi means two. One of our vocabulary words in this unit is bicameral. It's all a bicameral legislature is actually a two-house or two-section legislature. And of course, the English colonists get this idea from Parliament. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Okay, that was a pretty bad dad joke. But let's move on. If you think about the chain of command, you got to love a chain of command. What's the chain of command for our school? If you think about chain of command on our football team, at the top of that is Coach Isaacs. He is the head football coach. And then, of course, he has several assistants and staff that work under him. You know, how would that chain of command go? I don't work with the football team, so I don't know. But you have, obviously, the head coach, Isaacs, and then underneath him, Coach Shockey, who works as the defense coordinator, Coach Miller, who works as special teams coordinator, Coach Moore, many other, Coach DeHart's there helping. They have a chain of command. But ultimately, when it comes down to going forward on fourth down or when to use a timeout, the only one that can make that decision is the head coach, and that would be Coach Isaacs. But what about the chain of command for our school? What about the chain of command? I know that I did this last year when we were actually in school and in class, and I'll show you some of the answers that we kind of came up with in one of our other classes. Our chain of command in our school would work something like this. You know, you have Mr. Pettit as our principal. Under him are Mr. Crouch, Coach Harper. They're the vice principals. Deputy Stevens, who's in our building as a resource officer, is there. Our counselor, Miss Persinger. Last year, the kids were like, well, when the principals are gone, who's in charge? And they all said Coach Halsey, which we agree with. Our teachers are next, service personnel. And then we go to the seniors, juniors, sophomores. And at the bottom of our chain of command would be the lowly freshmen. Sorry, freshmen. But you're just not at the top of the ladder yet. Neither are you, sophomores. One of these days, in a couple years, you'll be the big seniors at the top there, see? We laughed the other day. Somebody said, you got seniors, juniors, sophomores, atomic waste, nuclear sludge, and then underneath that was the freshmen. I think when I was a freshman, I remember getting stuffed into a locker by some big bad senior who did that to me. But the reason why I'm doing this, okay, chain of command. Think about it. The King of Great Britain is in charge of the British Empire. But his empire has grown because now he has many thousands and thousands of people living over in the British colonies located in the New World. That's 3,000 miles away from Great Britain. How do you govern that? It's easy to govern Great Britain back home, but how do you govern 13 British colonies that are 3,000 miles away across the ocean? That's like your parents. It's easy for them when they're home to keep you right there under their thumb. Make sure you're going by the rules. Make sure that you're doing what they tell you. But when they're away for the weekend, they're not there to watch you. The old saying says, when the cat's away, the mouse will play. So, how does the King of Great Britain make sure, as the cat, that the mouse aren't playing over in the colonies? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about a little bit, is how the government was set up from the Great Britain, how the colonial government chain of command was set up. And we'll take a few short notes for this. After we're done with this, there's one assignment that you have to get done, and it's a worksheet that's going to be in the folder. So this is Unit 3, Life in the Colonies. Here we go. We only have 2 essential questions to do. The first essential question says, and I shortened it. It says, how was the colonial government chain of command set up? Okay, so, how is it set up? What's their chain of command? We talked about the chain of command on the football team. We talked about the chain of command here at our school. But what about the colonial government chain of command? Well, I'm going to slide this up a little bit, and you can see it. And remember, you can pause this and copy this down. Obviously, at the top of the food chain for Great Britain, obviously was the king. And I didn't realize it just now, but this little crown I drew, it looks like some kind of deformed crab. I don't really have the artistic skills that some of you guys have, but I tried to draw a crown there. At any rate, the king is at the top of the colonial government chain of command. Obviously, he's in control. Underneath the king was called the Privy Council. Now, the Privy Council was made up of nobles, people close to the king, and they actually lived in Great Britain, not over in the colonies, but they were in charge of making colonial policies. Okay? So the king had this Privy Council set up, and I like to think of the name privilege. It would have been a privilege to be on this council if the king would have selected you to be there. It would be the Privy Council, and they were selected to help make colonial policies. It's almost like as if the king had so much to do. He has so much to do to run Great Britain that, the colonies over there 3,000 miles away, okay, whatever. It was almost like he didn't want to deal with it that much, so he set up the Privy Council to help make colonial policies, make colonial decisions for him. and then anything they did would report to him. So, you know, if you look at this chain of command, the king had to report to nobody, but the Privy Council, they reported to the king. Now, this was how the next step was set up. Each colony in the New World had governors. They were usually appointed by the king, someone who had their hands in the king's pocket, some noble, somebody that was loyal to the king, and he would put them in charge of each one of the 13 colonies over in the New World. And the colonial governors reported to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council reported to the king. You see, that's how the colonial government, that's how a chain of command works. In each colony, there was an elected assembly where British colonists voted for representatives to serve on their colonial assembly. Each colony had one, like Virginia had their colonial assembly. Pennsylvania had their colonial assembly. And it was made up of people elected to serve. And of course, the people in the colonial assemblies talked about their issues with the colonial governors. The colonial governors reported to the Privy Council, and then the Privy Council reported to the king. And then the king would send back to the Privy Council, then it would go back to the colonial governors, and the colonial governments would talk to the assemblies, and so on and so forth. That's the way a chain of command works. And at the bottom of the colonial government chain of command, at the very bottom, like our freshmen, was the colonists themselves, the people. So if the people had an issue that they wanted to talk about, they would take it to the colonial assemblies. The colonial assemblies would then discuss it with the colonial governors, who would report back across the ocean to the Privy Council, and the Privy Council would take it to the king, and then it would come back down the line, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, in a time period when there were no Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchats, emails, phones. I mean, you know, sometimes this communication process could take considerable amount of time. If I'm not mistaken, by this time in history, they had gotten the passage across the Atlantic to about 3 months, maybe, on a ship. So a message could be delivered from the colonies to Great Britain in 3 months, and then an answer back. Communication was a slow process. But at any rate, that is your colonial government chain of command, right there. Now, we have to talk about something important that happened in world history at this point. At this point, Great Britain went through what was known as the Glorious Revolution. There's the bell. Get out of bed, Isabel Clarke. Can't sleep all day. You got to watch these videos. The Glorious Revolution was where the people of England rose up, and kind of a fallout from the French Revolution, but the Glorious Revolution, they rose up against the power of the king, and they actually overthrew King James II, I think, and replaced him with his daughter and her husband as the monarchs of England. But the people of England rose up against the king and against the power, this absolute power that he had, and some good things came out of that. And one of those things was the English Bill of Rights. Now, if a Bill of Rights sounds familiar to you, that's because later on, the colonists, when they won their independence from Great Britain, and we had to form our own country, and we created our own constitution, those people wanted a Bill of Rights to help protect the American citizens from the government. And they got that idea from the English Bill of Rights from hundreds of years before in the Glorious Revolution. So if we look at EQ number 2, it says, how did the English Bill of Rights influence the colonists? Well, this made the colonists interested in a type of representative government and a Bill of Rights that would help protect the citizens, because the English Bill of Rights protected the British people from overpower and overreach of the king. And our colonists saw this and later on wanted to use this idea in our new Constitution for our new country of America. We wanted a Bill of Rights to help protect the citizens. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But that's how it influenced them, is they wanted something very similar to this later on. Now we're going to go to some vocabulary words. There's 6 of them. Bi means two, because a bicycle can't stand on its own because it's too tired. Bicameral legislature. This is a lawmaking body made up of two houses or two sections. Parliament was set up this way, and the American colonists got this idea of a two-house legislature when we formed our own country. And of course, if you know now, we have Congress set up in our Constitution, and it has two sections to it. It has the Senate, and the other side is called the House of Representatives. So there's two sections of our Congress today, just like there was two sections in Parliament. Let's go back. Another idea that we get here in America from colonial times is the idea of a town meeting. Now, the town meeting is a place where colonists who were at the bottom of that chain of command, remember, look at them right here, up here. They were at the bottom, the colonists themselves, the people. A town meeting was where colonists met to discuss local issues that happened. This is another idea that has worked its way down through American government, all the way down to the local level, even today. Some of you live in the town of Anstead. I've heard some of you teenagers call it Deadstead because there's nothing to do. You can go hang out at Shell Station. Well, that was pre-COVID. Now you can't even hardly hang out at the Shell Station. But even as small of a town as Anstead is, we have a town council, we have a mayor, we have town meetings, you know. One of our own, our illustrious and wonderful custodian, Mr. Wayne Hogg, serves on our town council in Anstead. I bet y'all didn't know that. A little trivia for all of you. But he serves on our town council, and they have to discuss things about local issues here in Anstead. We get this idea from colonial times, and it's just passed its way down through hundreds of years to us today. And it's just the idea of local government, just making decisions for yourself. In fact, I heard at the last town meeting the other day that was discussed about what to do with the old Anston Middle School building. Not the gym. The gym is the community center, but the old building there where some of y'all went to school. And the town council discussed plans to maybe have that, you know, demolished or go through a demolition, taken down, torn down. Don't know what was decided at the town meeting and don't know if all that's going to happen, but that's just an idea or an example of things that people can discuss at a local town meeting. And we get this idea from colonial times. Still works its way down today. Now, one of our other vocabulary words is parliament. And parliament is, the best way to understand that is it's England's Congress. You know, it's just like our Congress. Instead of called Congress, it's called Parliament. And they worked with the king back in Great Britain, and today Parliament is, you know, England's Congress Parliament. And it's a two-house legislature. I talked about the Glorious Revolution a while ago. We'll keep it short. It's the time period when English people overthrew King James II, and they replaced him with his daughter Mary and her husband William of Orange or something like that, but they put them on the throne. You can go back in your world history and learn more about that, but the main thing I'm trying to pick up out of this Glorious Revolution is, you know, the English Bill of Rights come out of this. And the people made the king accept an English Bill of Rights which protected English citizens from the king. You know, no longer did the king have just absolute power, but citizens had certain natural rights as human beings that would protect them from the king. I want to add in an extra vocabulary word here called 5A, the Magna Carta. It sounds kind of funny, but it was a big official document that came out of all of the Glorious Revolution stuff, but it limited the king's power by saying that even the king was not above the law. Even the king had to obey the law. Just because he was king didn't give him a free pass to do whatever he wanted. So between the English Bill of Rights, which protected English citizens, and the Magna Carta, which said that even the king wasn't above the law, it put limits to the power of the king. The colonists liked these ideas, and later on would utilize some of these ideas as they created our government for the United States of America. Those things should sound familiar to you. Do we have a Bill of Rights on our Constitution? Yes, the first 10 amendments are known as the English Bill of Rights, and it protects Americans from the government. It allows us to have free speech. It allows us to have the right to bear arms. It allows us a right to a trial by a jury of our peers instead of one person saying, throw us in the dungeon, throw away the key, and let the rats lick at your sores for the rest of your life. I mean, these things are familiar to us because we took these ideas from England. The last vocabulary word today is the Privy Council itself. The Privy Council was in charge of all colonial policies. Now, of course, they were second in the colonial chain of command. They still had to report to the king, but they were in charge of all colonial policies. And coming up, we're going to talk about some of these policies that were created, some of these trade regulations and restrictions placed on the colonies, things that the colonists didn't like. And we're going to talk about that next. This concludes our Lesson 1 notes. So, look, it was pretty painless. When you guys come on January the 19th, I have, let me get this out for you. Remember, you are all unique and valuable from Christmas, so I have your little penny that says you are unique and valuable to give you so that you can keep it somewhere. And always remember how special each one of you are. So hopefully we'll see you on January the 19th. There's one assignment to do with these notes. There's a colonial government worksheet in the Lesson 1 folder for you to do. Upload it to me by January the 18th. And we will see you on Tuesday, January the 19th. This is Coach Eads. Over and out. Roger, over. Over and out. Over and out.